Okay, in this video we're going to be checking out the new Jumper T12 multi-protocol radio. This is pretty similar in terms of the ergonomics, size, features of the Jumper T8 SG V2, which is a radio I did not review. I reviewed this one here, the yellow one. This is the T8 SG V2 Plus, and the difference between the V2 and the V2 Plus is the Hall sensor gimbals. So the gimbals have Hall sensors, and this screen is an OLED screen. It's a little bit bigger. So the Jumper V2, not the Plus, comes with, it's the same case, and these gimbals are on the T12 and smaller screen here. So it's a smaller LED screen, and you get standard regular gimbals. It's pretty much, they feel just as good or better than the ones on the Jumper V1. They still feel very smooth. I like them. I think that they're just as good as the ones on the V2 Plus I was using as my daily driver. The biggest difference between basically this radio and the Jumper T8 SG V2 is that that one came with Deviation TX. This one comes with OpenTX as the firmware that runs the radio. And the other big difference is that the Jumper T8SG-V2 has internal modules. I guess the radio, the chips, or the 4-in-1 chips inside the actual radio itself. Whereas on the T12 is now on in the module bay here. So there's a JR module bay on all three of the radios, and you could add, for example, on the one that I was using before, I was able to put Crossfire in here, and it was working under PPM mode. I was not, however, able to get the R9M module to work. This one works with everything pretty much. So it works with the R9M, works with Crossfire, and all the modules are supported under full serial protocol. So no PPM, there's no latency. Everything is run under serial, as well as this external module here. I know you guys are wondering, oh, well, if you're running an external module, it's going to be slower because of latency, and basically because it's running a serial interface from this module to the electronics inside the firmware inside the radio. There is no latency using the external module, this particular foreign module. Now this module does come with some of these legacy buttons here and lights and this little dial here. So I was told that this is for use in radios that don't have OpenTX, where you want to select the different protocols and do binding. But because this radio has OpenTX, this module is supported on OpenTX, and you can do all your binding, everything within OpenTX like you did previously on the iRange X module that I showed you previously in a pretty long time. That was a video a long time ago, maybe like more than 6 months ago, on I think it was a Tyrannus X9D. And then of course you can do firmware updates on this one with the mini USB port here, so no new need for FTDI adapter or anything like that. You can do future updates to add new features, new protocols that use the 4 particular chips here that are inside this module. And so it's totally upgradable for the future. And of course it's all supported under OpenTX, which is the highlight of this radio. Now, as I mentioned before, it's basically the same radio as the T8 SGV2, standard gimbals, LED screen, all the buttons are the same, all the switches are the same. So you get these these 4 switches here are 3 position switches. So that's A, B, C, and D. And then the ones up here on the shoulder are 2 position switches. And then you have a dial on this side over here and a dial on this side over here. You got a dummy antenna. This is basically where on the old where the T8SG-V2, that's where the internal radio antenna will come out, but there's no internal radio in this one. It's only all the radio protocols are supported via the module, so there's nothing actually there. And then you can do your firmware updates via this USB cable or this mini USB port, and then you have a trainer port here. And then on the bottom, you have the same battery tray. I've already put in my lithium LiPo battery here, transmitter battery, and it's basically the same bay, same size as on the T8SG-V2 and V2 Plus. And then on this one you have a micro SD card, which I have already installed with, it supports sounds and your Lewis scripts, all that kind of stuff. Essentially, if you want to think about it, this is if you want to think about this radio, it's basically a Taranis, like a QX7 or X9D, but just smaller. So it's much smaller form factor, and it supports OpenTX. And just give you a size comparison to the X Lite. I'll put these side by side. They're pretty similar in size. Obviously, the ergonomics of the X Lite are better because of the grips. If you're a thumber, I think you'll like that a lot. But as I mentioned in the video for this one, I didn't like the stiffness of the sticks. The springs are just too stiff for me. I prefer the more loose springs on the jumper radios for some reason. That's just me. I think probably most people will be the other way around. But for me, I prefer the looser sticks on the jumper radios. I don't know why. That's just the way it turned out to be for me. Now, as I mentioned, this radio does have full support for the Crossfire module, so I have the micro transmitter. It'll also support the full-size transmitter as well that has the JR module adapter. If you happen to have, I'm not exactly sure if the adapter on the full size is the same as this one, but if you happen to have the micro module, you want to be careful about the pins. I had a slight misalignment when I was trying to put my this module in, and instead of going into the holes here, it was going into the side of the holes in between the casing, and of course it wouldn't seat. So if that's the case, you wanted to take a look at the pins here. Let me just pull this module out. So basically, you want to make sure that these pins are properly lined up, and I believe in my case I had to slightly bend them towards the side here to make sure that they would go in straight. Now after I did that, I had no problems getting this in, but initially I had that problem. If you have this micro module and have that issue where it doesn't go in all the way, it won't see it. Don't force it because it's going in the wrong, basically it's going in the wrong holes, and you're gonna probably break something. So don't force it. It should just slide in easily. And if you have that problem, just make sure you line up the pins right, and then this module should fit totally fine. Of course, the stock module has no issues. That fit no problem. I never had any issues with this one. Or the R9M module, I had no issues with lining up the pins. The holes are bigger here, and you can see that the pins will just hit the circuit board and then end up going into the proper holes. So no issues with fitment on this one. Just the TBS Crossfire micro module for me gave me a little bit of a headache getting this in there. Also, in terms of support, it does mean it's fully supported, unlike the issue with the Crossfire module with, I think, a QX7, I believe, and like the Horus X10S. Had some sort of an issue. We had to do a hardware mod, or otherwise you'd have some sort of a telemetry problem or something like that. I'm not exactly sure. I never actually used this with my QX7, so I never ran into that problem. I do know that the jumper radio does fully support this module, so you don't have to make any hardware mods or anything like that if you happen to get this radio. Alright, so we'll go ahead and power this up. And this powers up. And it powers up just like the QX7, where you have to hold the power button down and you have to see the four dots go across. It takes about 2 seconds. And then I have the voice files installed in the micro SD card. So if you don't have a micro SD card, which it doesn't come with, you have to install that yourself. Then you're not going to get the voice notice that when you turn it on, and you won't get any of the other sounds. But you can just basically, you think about this. This is basically, if you think of this as like a smaller Taranis X9D and treat it as such. That's basically how this works. There's nothing really all that different. Obviously, the interface and the buttons are going to be different. I'm going to cover that here in a second. But in terms of the functions, it's an OpenTX radio. It should function just like a Taranis, and just that the only difference is you have a multi-protocol module in the back here, so you can not only run FreeSky, but you can run pretty much everything else: FlySky, Spectrum, and of course with the other modules you can do long range with Crossfire and the R9D or the R9M module. Okay, just to cover the interface a little bit here. You have a enter button here and a back button on this side. This is part of your navigation, as well as the 4 directional arrows here, so up, down, left, and right. And if you want to get into the radio setup, you're going to long press the left button. Then it gets into the radio setup, and then you can page through by hitting left and right. Actually, sorry, if you hit right, it'll go to the next page. You can see page 4 of 9, 5 of 9. But if you want to go to the previous page, back doesn't seem to do anything, so you have to actually long press the right to go back to page 4, long press the right button to go back to page 3. So that's how that works. But all you can see here, this is OpenTX. It's got all the same menus and everything. This is no different. I believe this is what is this? I think it's 222. Find that page. Yeah, so it's actually 222 dated 2018 July 31st, and this is actually I think is based off of the firmware for the X7. So if you're curious what SD card files to get, SD card contents, get the ones for the X7. Those will work on the micro SD card. And then here under the radio setup, you can set up your date, and all of this stuff is going to be the same. One of the things you want to change right away is your battery range. So if you're going to use the 4 AA batteries, you're going to want to adjust this to 4 volts to I think like maybe 5.1 volts. And then in my case, I'm using a 2S LiPo, so I adjusted the range from 6 to 8.4. And then one of the things to notice when you first turn it on is that your alarm is going to go off here because the battery low alarm is set to like 5 volts, I believe. So you want to adjust that to, if you're using the battery tray, the AA battery tray, you want to adjust that to like something lower, like 4.3 volts, something like that, so that you get a warning. Otherwise, it's going to just keep warning you until you change that. So that's one of the first things you're going to want to change. You can see that all the rest of the menus here are going to be the same as if it was any other Tyrannus. It's just that the navigation is going to be a little bit different here. And one other thing here you want to make sure is that you have the channel order in the way you like, the way you set up your equipment, and the default is usually AATR, and I usually just leave it alone as AATR. Okay, so as I mentioned, to get into the radio setup, you would long press the left button. That goes into the radio setup or the transmitter setup. Get back out. If you short press, this gets you into the model menu, and here you can select different models. And I've set up FreeSky D16 here on Model 1. I usually just bind up a bunch of models to that are all like say for example the XM Plus receiver. Usually just bind them all up to one model, and just going to show you really quick what it's like to set up a model. So we'll just go down to this open one here. There's nothing on here. Long press the enter button, and then short press to create model. It'll load up a model here. Then you want to select one of the types. I'm going to select multi-rotor and hit enter. Then here you want to set up your channel order, and I'm just going to go through all of this one by one. So I'm just hitting the right button. This is my order. It's going to be AATR, and then I'm going to hit enter. Long press the enter button to confirm. And then I've created a new model here, and then to get into the model you just press the right key, and then here you can basically set up a name. So to set up a name you would hit the enter button, and then the up and down you can set up your letters that way. So if you want to make that a capital F, you would long press, now go to the next letter, for example, like that. But in this case I'm just going to exit out of here. If you hit back, then I'll take you back out to the rest of the menu here. You can go up and down, and the thing that you want, that I want to show you, you need to be aware of, that's the most important, is that there is no internal RF. So it always defaults to this internal RF mode, but there's no internal RF module in here, so you got to turn that off. So you go here, select that, and then just these are the, well, let me just turn this off first, and I'll show you what's going on. So turn that off, and then hit enter, and then go to external RF, select that, and then these are the choices you have: PPM, XJT, DSM2, Crossfire, MLT is multi, then you have R9M, S-Bus. Those are the ones that are available for the external RF module. So in our case, we're going to select the multi-protocol module. That's the one that's in there right now. Hit enter, and then get over to the, navigation on this is a little bit tricky. So now we want to select here. This is the protocol that you want to select from this module. So in this case, there's FlySky, Hubsan, FreeSky. So this is going to be a super long list. I'm just going to show you really quick all the ones that are available. And not only this is like the main protocol here, but some of these will have subtypes. So this, they'll have this, and then some of these will have subtypes below that you have to then select. And of course, I would consult the multi-protocol module GitHub page. It has explanations of all this stuff. So I'm just going to go ahead and exit out of here. Let's say you want to select, let's go to Free Sky. So there's Free Sky. Go to Enter, go down, and then there's different subtypes for Free Sky. There's D16, D8, there's D16 8 channel. So if you select D16 8 channel, then it'll only use 8 channels instead of 16 channels. That's for lower latency. So if you want the lower latency, then select that one. Then there's just some other kind of not really used much, like the V8. There's a LBT. This like EU. I think that's it for the Free Sky. So I normally use a D16 or D8 or D16 8 channel. So let's just select that and then go down here. Now for whatever reason you can't seem to select the second part here, so you can select the first part for that. You can see it changes that part, channel 2, 3, but I can't seem to find a way to select this number here to change that to 8. So I'm just assuming that it's doing 8 channels even though it says 1 to 16 there. So, and then here you can change your receiver number. That's how I'm binding multiple models to the same model setup here. As I just create one receiver. I think it's 0, 0 on the other one. So I'm not going to use that same one, but we'll just set this to 2. And this is I'm using that ID on some of these other models, so I'm going to exit out of that. So it won't let me use that, so I'll just set this to something else like 5. Okay, so that's the receiver number, and then you would hit bind here. So basically for binding, you would go to your model, power up the model by pressing the bind button, usually like on any of the Free Sky receivers. You hold the bind button down, power it up, and then I'll go into bind mode, and then go to your radio here, and then hit bind, and I'll try and bind it up. And that's pretty much it. And usually binds up within this is like pretty much right away immediately. Then hit the back button to exit out of that. Then the other thing here is you want to make sure you set your failsafe. And I typically just use no pulses. That usually works for most of the XM Plus receivers, and pretty much I don't think on D that you can set the failsafe here. So you could set that up from the flight controller. And I think that's all. I think that's it for Free Sky. That's all you have to do. Now, if you're setting up Fly Sky, something I want to show you here is there's this Fly Sky. That's Fly Sky first generation. You don't want to use that for a lot of the newer Fly Sky receivers, the 2A receivers. You want, and this one, I didn't see this until I searched for it quite a bit. It is this one here, FS2A. So that's the Fly Sky 2A protocol. And here I usually set the subtype to where is it? I usually set the subtype to PPM IBUS, and then here I set up a receiver number, and then you can bind here as well. Now when you do the bind, for a lot of the micro 2A receivers, you set up here, you bind, and then what you have to do is you actually have to turn off the transmitter to complete the bind. For whatever reason, that's the way this seems to work on this radio, and I did the same thing on the older, the other jumper as well, this one here. So it has something to do with the multi-protocol module, I believe, and the way that the bind works on the Fly Sky 2A protocol. So if you're using that, that's one of the little quirky things that I wanted to make sure that you guys knew about in terms of binding. Yeah, and you can see here, I'm still in bind mode even though I've exited out of that. That's another quirky thing. So really the only way to get out of the bind mode is to actually shut off the radio.
Welcome to OpenTX.
Okay, so a quick little demo there for setting up a model. Essentially, it's going to be the same as you would do it on any other radio, except that you would make sure you select the external module, in this case, the multi-protocol module, and then model setup is going to be pretty much the same as any other Tyrannus. So go ahead and I'm going to delete that model. So since that's selected, I can't do that. So I'm going to actually go to the Crossfire module next. I'm going to select that, and then I'm going to delete this. So basically, to bring up that menu, I'm long pressing the enter button, and then I'm going to delete that model that I just created. So get rid of all of that. Now that model's gone. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll shut this off. And then we'll put the Crossfire module in there, and I want to show you how the Lua scripts are working. Okay, so I got my Crossfire module in there, and you can see it's turned on. I don't have it actually connected to anything. Now, what's kind of interesting is I think on Andy RC's video, he was having an issue with the speaker, and I was having a little bit of a buzzing noise when I first had this module in there, but and you can see, I don't know if you can hear that, there's no noise at all now. So I'm not sure what's up with that. It seems to have gone away, and I filmed this a few times, and it was only there initially, but now it's gone, so kind of weird. Anyway, I want to show you that the Lua scripts are working. So you go into the radio setup here, and then you want to go to the SD card contents, and then go into Crossfire, and you can see the Crossfire Lua scripts here. So we can go ahead and execute that, and you can see that the Crossfire micro transmitter shows up here, and this is where you can change all your settings for the micro module. And this is just I think I set these default settings in here. I haven't actually set this up since I had this in my Tyrannus. I'm not exactly sure if these are the same settings or not, but I think they are. But you can see that the Crossfire Lua scripts are working just fine, and this is completely fully supported on this radio. Okay, so let's go back out here and then show you the setup on the R9M. I don't think I have to swap the module, but just go in here, and the way I have the R9M set up is obviously here on the external RF, R9M mode, FCC, because I'm in the United States. You want to change that to, I think, LBT for if you're in the elsewhere, and channel, receiver number, and binding, and then all works the same. And I have failsafe set to no pulses, and export on. And here I have my power set up to 100 milliwatts. I think this module can go all the way up to 1 watt. Yeah, so that's the difference between the Crossfire micro module and the R9M, is that the R9M, this guy, can go up to 1 watt, whereas you need the full-size Crossfire to go to 1 watt. The micro module only goes up to 100 milliwatts. So yeah, I'll talk about this later in that video, the advantages of that one and the differences and all that kind of stuff. But if you're wondering, yeah, fully supported, of course, the R9M on this radio as well. Okay, so that pretty much covers all the features, functions of this radio. As you can tell, it pretty much works with everything, and I haven't seen any issues in terms of compatibility problems. It runs the latest OpenTX. Now, of course, it is I believe, a custom build of 222. It is based off of the X7 image, but if you try to update this radio with a newer version that comes, let's say, in the future, down the road, based off the X7 image, it probably isn't going to work on this radio. I'm pretty sure that this company is going to continue to support this radio and provide future updates. So when 223 comes out, I'm sure that will be downloadable, and then you can flash it to this radio if you need to. So I wouldn't be too worried about that. But in terms of right now, August 2018, pretty much anything that's on 222 is supported via OpenTX on this radio. So in my mind, I just view this as a lighter and smaller, cheaper X9D. So that can do all the multi-protocol modules. So if you think about it, if you wanted to get this module separately, I believe if you wanted to buy this by itself, it's like $40, and I think the iRange X version of this is around the same price, maybe $38. They're based off of the STM32 chip, so pretty similar. With the mini USB port, it's going to be pretty easily upgradable, and this by itself is about $40. But the radio with the module, this right here, is about $90. And what's interesting is that the T12 is actually like $30 cheaper than the T8 SGV2, which is the same chassis, and it has the same 4-in-1 chip on the inside. It's just internal, not in a module. and that one's $120. So it's kind of odd that this one's so much less, and it comes with OpenTX. But I think, which personally for me, I like OpenTX better than Deviation TX. Nothing wrong with Deviation TX. It's obviously works perfectly fine, and I was able to, figure things out and use this jumper as the other one here as my daily driver without any issues. It's just that OpenTX is, I think, a little bit more intuitive in terms of the way the functions work and how to do binding and set up models, that kind of stuff. And plus, you have the advantage of all the scripts that are out there and voice files, all that kind of stuff. So I think at $90 with the multi-protocol module, it's a really good value. But the thing that you're going to want to thing you're going to want to know if it's for you is, are you okay with some fairly loose sticks, and they're kind of a little bit on the shorter side. I prefer that. If you don't like that, this radio is not going to be for you. If you prefer a larger radio, this definitely is not going to be for you. If you prefer a smaller radio and a lighter radio, you might want to consider this. And it is quite a bit cheaper than if you bought a regular Taranis. I think a regular Next X9D is going to run you around $200 plus the cost of the 4-in-1 module. That's $240. So that, this is less than half of that. And for me, all the features and everything, the fact that it fully supports Crossfire without any hardware mods, and the R9M module, this is actually a really good setup for me. And I'm going to actually switch over to this as my daily driver from the T8SG V2 Plus radio. So this one's going to get retired, and I'm still considering using the X-Lite. I'm waiting for the multi-protocol module to come out for this guy, as well as the R9M Mini. But the disadvantage of the R9M Mini is that it only goes to 100 milliwatts, versus the R9M goes to the full size. This one here goes to 1 watt. So not so sure if I'll be switching to the X-Lite yet. I'm still kind of debating what I'm going to do about the stick tension on this, because I've been hearing stories that you could probably swap the springs out, and I'm actually thinking about actually doing that, but then I heard that opening this thing up is kind of a pain in the butt. So yeah, I like the ergonomics of the X-Lite because of the size and the ergonomics of the handles and everything, but the feel for me, the gimbals on this one feels just fine, and I can't tell the difference. Okay, so I'm back, and apparently my SD card ran out of memory, so the recording got kind of cut off, but I didn't have a whole lot left to say. Just wanted to talk about the range on the 4-in-1 module. All the protocols are transmitted at 100 milliwatts, so there's no issue with range. I've used this with X9 or XM Plus receivers and a few FlySky receivers, and the range seems to be the same, or about the same as what was on the Jumper and on pretty much any, like a QX7, any kind of trans that typically transmits at 100 milliwatts. So I have no issues with the range in terms of this particular module. And if you guys are wondering if this radio affects the range of any of the external modules like the R9M or the Crossfire, it has absolutely no effect on that. Now, when you do use these external long-range modules and you bump up the power, so if not, it might not necessarily be on the micro module, but if you use the full-size module and you bump up the power, it is going to suck down the internal battery in here. So don't use the 4AA batteries. Use a LiPo in here, and I have like an 1800 milliamp hour 2S LiPo. Should be fine in terms of powering up those external long-range modules. So if you have that, if you are going to use one of these, range isn't going to be a problem. It's just that you might have an issue with power, and it's not recommended to use the AA battery tray, and you should use a LiPo instead with more capacity, so that you don't drain that battery, because these external modules can be very power hungry. Okay, so that's going to cover it for this video on the Jumper T12 radio. I'm going to actually switch this as my daily driver, and I will report back in the future as to my long-term thoughts on this, as I did on the T8SG V2 Plus, which I still like, but I'm not going to, obviously there's kind of no point to using both of them, because they both do multi-protocol, and the T12 can now use the R9M module, so just go ahead, I'll switch over to this one. And in terms of the interface being OpenTX and everything is a plus for me, so definitely looking forward to using this one. And if you guys have rambled on quite long enough on this radio, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.